Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's Training Industry Leader Talk on moving beyond outdated metrics in L&D. Today's event is brought to us by the Regis Company, CGS Immersive, and Training Industry Courses and Research. I am Elizabeth Parker. I am the Director of Marketing here at Training Industry, and I'm so happy you've decided to join us for this next session with the Regis Company on practice, evidence, and the future of learning measurement. We've got a great session coming up, so get ready for that. Before we get started with our speakers, I would just like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items with you all to help you interact and get the most out of your time with us. Of course, please feel free to continue using the chat. I see everybody letting us know where you're joining from, so if you haven't done so yet, I invite you to do so now. And any questions you have for our speakers, you can pop open that Q&A panel and submit them there. We will have a Q&A time at the end of the session. You'll also receive a brief survey when you exit the session, and we do always appreciate your feedback about our topic, our speakers, anything else you might like to share. And just a reminder, all of our sessions are being recorded today. They'll be archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a follow-up email from us later on today with a link to those sessions that you can review again, maybe share with somebody who did not get to attend. If this is your first Training Industry event, a special welcome goes out to you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer lots of resources to support your role in L&D through live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, podcast, in-person conferences, research report, courses, and so forth and so on. So we would love to hear more from you about what you've learned on social media as well. So please follow us on your favorite platforms and we can continue the conversation there. Now, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our panel of speakers for our next session. We have Mike Vaughan, who pioneered modern simulation approaches grounded in neuroscience principles that develop skills through deliberate and measurable practice. We have Donald Taylor, who is a leading researcher on L&D trends and AI in learning, with data from 100 plus countries and 4 published reports on AI and L&D since 2023. And finally, we have David Kelly, who is a learning and performance strategist with 2 decades of experience exploring the convergence of learning and technology to transform workplaces. I know this session is going to be great, so that's enough for me. Mike, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'm so excited to have everybody here today. Before I jump in, just wanted to see if you could go to that chat window. I see that everyone's typed in their locations. That is fantastic. Something else that we're very curious about is why you're interested in measurement. Why now? What's changed over the last 20 years that got over 1,000 people to register for this event today? And so, quite frankly, that kind of blows our mind because usually a lot of people don't want to get into the data and the nitty-gritty. And we would love to know what is of interest to you. So if you can get into that chat, that would be awesome. And as Elizabeth mentioned, please put your questions in there. I'll walk us through kind of the agenda in a moment, but we want to be sure to do our very best to address those questions. And then, of course, if we don't hit them today, we will be sure to follow up with you as well. Before I jump in, I just want to say I'm so grateful to be joined by 2 amazing individuals. First and foremost, I've known these individuals for a while, and they're just great human beings. They genuinely care about the learning industry, the people within the industry, and quite frankly, where we're going in the industry. And second, they really get it. Not just because they're incredibly old and wise. They 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 do the research. They roll up their sleeves and they really try to make sure that they're bringing a point of view to really help guide us all. And so that's why we're here today. We're here to hear from them, have them share some of their wisdom and insights. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to move us forward into the big picture agenda here, and then I'll be circling back to David and Donald with a few questions here. But to give you a little idea, what we're going to do is break this up into three parts. And so part one, we're going to do our best to really talk about why is the CLO accountability changing so much. And so if you're a CLO or a learning leader on this call, we truly empathize with you. Your cheese is going to be significantly moved this next year or two. The next thing we're going to hit is behavioral telemetry. This is what we really believe is the future of learning measurement. Now, this might be a new word for a lot of you. Don't worry about it. We're going to talk a little bit about it, and I'm going to give you some details to really describe it and tell you a little bit of what it looks like. And quite frankly, the coolest thing is I'm going to show you how it feels. Second, we're going to get into measuring behavior, specifically what tools, specifically simulations, and how they're being used to capture this behavioral telemetry. Now, if you're just like me, if it ain't easy, if it ain't cheap to capture all this data, it's not going to happen. And so we're also going to show you a little bit on how things are moving so quickly and making this really easy for everybody. So let me go ahead and move us over into our questions here. And I'm going to actually stop sharing a little bit. And Donald, David, for years, measurement has really focused on consumption, completion, self-reflection, and so forth. And what we're all hearing is CLOs are really being asked a different question. And it's not about did someone learn something? It's really, are people ready? Who's ready? I got this initiative. Which individual can I staff on this initiative? I got this task. Who's the best suited for this? Maybe a new job. I need data to tell me which person is ready. So those are some of the shifts we're seeing. And I know, Donald, with your global sentiment survey, which I truly love, it's been a wonderful tool and with great insights. From your global perspective, why is traditional learning metrics losing credibility with executives?
Mike, I wouldn't. By the way, thank you for saying that I'm incredibly old. That was
Yeah.
that was a really great introduction. But I point out as an analyst that there's no correlation between age and wisdom. So the second part of your thing that I'm also
That is
wise
true. There is no
doesn't hold up.
correlation. That is true.
Let's go back to the analytics. So we've got why is it that there are these traditional metrics losing credibility? I don't think they ever had credibility, to be honest. And I think what we're seeing is not so much that the traditional measures of completion rates and responses and reactions to training events losing credibility. It's just that they weren't really taken seriously in the first place. But what has happened is that the value of people, the value of skills and knowledge has increased. And so now executives are saying, we need to know. And those measures you've been showing us don't give us the information. I think that's what's changed, Mike. And I see it in the Global Sentiment Survey because this year, I asked people what they think is important in the year ahead. Showing value has increased for the past 3 years, and it's now at its highest level ever. And so the need to show what we're doing actually providing an impact. And that's what all the chat was about, providing an impact, providing value. It's become real. It's moved outside the L&D department to becoming an asset for the organization. And we have to take it seriously.
So just to follow up on that a little bit, how are L&D practitioners expressing the issues, around showing value, and how well or badly does this fit with what leaders are expecting?
I think there's a bit of a mismatch, unfortunately, between what L&D people are saying and what executives are saying. And still, I ask people, what's your challenge for the year ahead? And this year I've got over 3,500 people from over 100 countries responding.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of words. There's 40,000 words to go through. It's like reading a book.
Yeah.
And the responses, you can find the themes around the value in there as they fall into 5 themes. One is that people want to prove measurable business impact. They want to define learning as an investment, not a cost. They want to move from activity to performance and behavior change. They see the challenge of working in an AI-saturated environment. This is one of the big drivers, that the traditional role of L&D has been providing content, and that's being undermined by generative AI. Value, of course, is the 5th theme, is that value is underpinning the reason for having L&D in the first place. And without that, especially with the competition of generative AI, there's a real issue, an existential issue for learning and development. I think the gap here, though, is that when we talk about ROI, typically still learning and development professionals are seeing it at a transactional, event-based level. How much did I get out of this course? Not so much on a thematic, well, these people now, to your point earlier, have the skills to do the job, and we can see that. I think that's where the mismatch is still happening with L&D.
I love that point. Yeah, you're right. I think ROI has been that thing that's kind of held us back in L&D for a very, very long time.
By the way,
And
there's a great point in the chat here. We don't have any time to express our issues. We're buried in work. And I think that's a real issue for L&D today, is that there's so much going on. There's so much pressure to get the job done. It's really difficult to take a step back and do the sort of strategic stuff we're talking about, Mike.
boy, that does capture it very well. Yeah, thank you. David, love to get your perspective too, from kind of that practitioner, you attend a lot of conferences, you meet with a lot of enterprises, CLOs. Where are CLOs feeling the most pressure and around proof and accountability and so on?
Well, I think you've hit on the key word within the question is accountability. I mean, as Don mentioned, we've had these metrics for a while, and they're kind of table stakes. And there's not a lot of accountability when your metrics are around completion rates and satisfactions, which at least not business accountability. And I think that that's what's changing here. Now we're entering an environment where there are metrics that can better link the efforts of our training and performance support initiatives to business metrics. And that's an exciting place to be, but it's also a place of accountability. It's a place where now we can connect the dots between the work that we're doing and how it applies and supports business metrics. So I think accountability is the key piece there, because as you mentioned in the intro, Mike, we're shifting from a place of did people complete the course and did they complete their compliance training to are people ready? And in an incredibly disruptive environment, that's kind of a shift in the lens through which we see our work is are people ready? Because that's where the accountability is going to come from.
Love that. And as you're connecting with individuals out there, are there any metrics that still matter as we're now talking about readiness and of course behavioral telemetry, looking ahead and seeing how are they able to apply these skills and so on. But are there any metrics that still matter that we got to make sure we don't lose track of?
Well, a lot of us work in highly compliance-oriented organizations, and that piece of the equation still matters. That's why course completions and a lot of the stuff that we do, they still matter because they're still part of an ecosystem where we are a very compliance-driven organization. So it's not a matter of shifting from one to the other. It's kind of a this plus the new world that we're entering into. And I think that it's about metrics that aren't just about learning anymore. Again, comes back to that readiness equation. It's about what are the metrics that can help us close the gap of people being ready for their work, and what are the business metrics that tell their story. And I think that, as Don touched on, some of the technologies that are emerging are giving us a better opportunity to play in this space. Some of the stuff that's going on in the systems that we're using to train people on that can give us more data around what people are doing rather than just what they know and are they ready, but the behavioral types of the data points that can show us what people actually can do around their competency. Because we're increasingly entering a world where it's not just about knowing what people know isn't enough anymore. It's about what their actions matter, and we can track their actions more than their intentions, because that kind of data is gold as we enter a skills economy.
Yeah, that is gold, isn't it? Yeah, really makes sense. And I wanted to take a minute, and I see there's some great questions in there, and Donald, thank you for getting in there. Maybe David, if you can look at a few of those too. I was going to just take a moment and really hit this fancy word, behavioral telemetry. Um, Telemetry, you've probably heard this. Obviously, this is not new because it comes from aerospace, military systems, software engineering. The word telemetry literally means measuring at a distance, collecting signals from a system while it's actually operating. So that's what's really different here. And the word behavioral was added to behavioral telemetry when cognitive science, behavioral economics, product analytics really took off. And so now we're really seeing behavioral telemetry enter L&D. And so when we think about really the future of measurement and where it's going, we really see behavioral telemetry really kind of guiding the way. And a quick little definition to hopefully help make sense of this is behavioral telemetry. It captures people data. So as you're going through an experience, making decisions, it's tracking those decisions and patterns. It's seeing how you look at that feedback that you got from making those decisions, and did you incorporate that feedback into your next decision? It's also looking at when you're introduced to a different situation or the situation's becoming more difficult in the learning experience. How are you adapting your thinking? Are your mental models and everything shifting? So, in short, it's not the traditional stuff where you're just looking at completions, self-reflection, and knowledge. It's really assessing someone in real time, putting them in different situations to see how they're responding. Real quick, I'm going to be fast with this, but we'll be happy to share all this in more detail. Some examples that behavioral telemetry is around decision analysis, being able to look at how people are making decisions, perspective taking, what perspective influence their decisions, tendency, do they have a tendency to lean one way or another, and how would that impact them in their leadership role? Sentiment and tone, obviously with AI being able to capture everything on video, understanding their tone, their body language, their disposition, all of those are data points that are now available to us to be able to help us understand. My favorite part is mental model shifts. So are people's thinking changing? So to put this together in kind of a quick nutshell, so if you think about traditional measurement on knowledge and completion, then skills intelligence has been taking off, obviously, the last couple of years, mainly because of AI. And what that basically means, you have your Eightfolds and TechWolf, Workera type of platforms that are taking all of this data points and then using that to infer someone's readiness. That's good, but it can get better when you start adding behavioral telemetry. So now imagine you're having somebody in an experience and you're observing how they're making those decisions, incorporating that feedback, how their decisions are changing, all of that in real time, and then using that data along with the skills intelligence data to really prove talent readiness. Now, if you're like me, and a lot of people are always like, okay, this sounds cool, but is this 2 years out? Is this 3 years out? Well, actually, it exists today. And so I'm just going to show you a quick example, and I'll be brief, mainly just so you can at least get an idea. So this is a skills intelligence dashboard or a talent readiness dashboard. And in this particular program, it's a leadership program, 63 participants. So this is your quick executive dashboard. And then in this dashboard, this says these are the skills that were being assessed. And in this, it starts to give you breakdown. The ones that in active listening, obviously people are doing rather well, but in strategic communication is kind of an area that they're not doing so well. And then you can start looking at how is those proficiency and the distribution across those looking. So where people, about 22% of the organization or the participants are showing advance, whereas seven are not. And so now what does this mean? How do we know if people are ready? Well, we start looking at all that behavioral telemetry, so a massive amount of data points that was then consumed and analyzed. And it's really saying, based on this particular simulation experience, 14 people are client ready, 25 need supervision, and about 24 still require some additional training. So now imagine you're a CLO and you just need to go target those 24 and maybe 25. And so it helps you really guide your dollars, but it also helps you in the organization say who's ready and who's ready for certain roles. All right. So I want to get into kind of the next topic here. And often people are saying, okay, that's really great. You got all that wonderful data. It's made easy now. It's easy to see. It pinpoints kind of where the people are and their readiness. But how do you capture this? How do you measure this? And, David and Donald, we've talked about this, for a long time, simulations have been something that people really love. There's a lot of great research about them and their efficacy. People enjoy them, but often they're too expensive. They're hard to build. They're hard to maintain, hard to deploy. So sounds really cool, but what we're now all excited about is that they're now affordable. It can replace e-learning, replace virtual, it can replace classroom learning. And so, Donald, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you again and ask you a question here. Let me go ahead and zoom in on you. Um, in all your research, around AI and just in L&D in general, how are simulations changing what's possible in measurement?
Right. Just to let you know, Mike's referring to this report here, which came out last September, the fourth in our AI in L&D series, which is 60 pages, and we've got 20 pages of case studies, another 15 pages looking at how people are using AI. Simulations is absolutely one of the forefront areas, as well as using AI to create content, where people are finding that they're getting real value out of it. And there are lots of ways in which that's going to happen. I'm aware we're tight on time, so I want to just drill down on that question. How are simulations changing what's possible? They're changing what's possible because they collect data as part of the learning experience. I mean, it is not complicated to express it like that, but when you think about it like that, you're moving from having to collect people's reactions after an event to understanding their actual behavior during practice. And that's just the two things are world apart. And to come back again to your earlier point, this is showing whether people are capable. Are they ready to do the job? So we can see during the course of it, not just are they capable, but also in which areas do they need further practice in a way that is very difficult to do certainly in classroom training, but also elsewhere. So to answer your question, the data is there in the simulation already, Mike, and it's making it possible to answer all those great questions. I wouldn't say immediately, but the data is there on tap for when you want to access it.
Yeah, and real quick, just so I don't forget about it, if you're interested in that report, drop something into the chat for us. If not,
Yes.
at the end, we're gonna put a QR code up there. Put your name in there, and we'll be sure to send that out. It's very good research, and it does have some really good use cases.
And thank you for sponsoring it, Regis, I should say.
And that too. And one of the things to follow up, we're talking about this behavioral telemetry, and it's fundamentally different than surveys, tests, self-reporting. So in your opinion, why is this behavioral telemetry so important now? And how is that going to really shape the future of learning, in your opinion?
It does rely on learning and development being ready to deal with it. And I think that's very
Big
important.
time.
So it is not something where you're just going to pick up a box and run with it. This is now something which, if learning and development is capable of rising to the challenge, can answer those questions about, are people ready? What are they doing? And also answer another issue around personalization, which is one of the other big trends which we're seeing at the moment. If you know where the small areas perhaps where people need help, great. The simulation data provides that information and enables you to focus your activity there. That's fundamentally different from surveys, tests, and self-reporting, all of which are prone to error, obviously, but also they don't reflect the actual activity. And that's the key thing about simulations. They're reflecting the actual activity. So a well-built simulation tells us what people can and can't do, and a bit of what they know and don't know. And it will change the way L&D acts in the future, bring it much closer to the business, provided that L&D professionals are ready to deal with that data. I think that's a key point, Mike. We can't just slip into it using that in the same way we've used other stuff. We have to be ready to have conversations with the business about how that data reflects their reality.
Yeah, great point. And that's kind of why I'm excited about these new dashboards, because it summarizes it for the L&D professional. It charts it out. It provides them the insights. It provides them some of the direction on what skills are ready and so forth. So really excited about how that's going to help the L&D community really communicate with the numbers. But, David, love to follow up with you on a few questions. Like I mentioned at the beginning, simulations have traditionally been very expensive to build and so forth. And, you get to see a lot of the design shifts and, how teams are rethinking, how to build some of this. What are you seeing as kind of what needs to change in L&D as far as design and creating that course experience, moving from consumption to practice and so on?
Sure. I think there's two major elements in terms of how it's affecting design. And the first you've touched on in terms of the accessibility of building a simulation. I've been in this field for a while as an old person, as we mentioned in
I really set that up on that, didn't I? You guys are never gonna let me live that one
Oh
down.
no, I think I will thank you on behalf of my children who feel like that is going to be the best way I've ever been introduced
There
ever.
you go. There you go. I have three grandkids, so I'm there with y'all. Yeah, yeah.
But I think that there's two elements to it. I think the first element is that accessibility. I mean, I remember when I started doing simulations, it was really complex. I mean, in
Mm,
fairness to the work that I did and the work that our team did, we built a simulation, but what we really built was a complex branching scenario, and it kind of was skinned as a simulation. It was presented in a simulative narrative, but it was under the hood. It was basically a branching scenario because that's what we had access to. We had access to the WYSIWYG type of an environment. We weren't coders. We couldn't go in and build very technical things, the expensive things that you did. But with there more that now there are tools that are much more accessible that enable you to build the complex requirements of a true simulation in a much more user-friendly way. So that's the core element. But like any tool, the other piece I think is even more important. Like any tool, it's only going to be as good as the person who's using it. And I can use the most complex tool to do the same sort of basic simulation environment that I did in the past. So for me, it's less about you need the complexity of the tool, but you need the mindset shift attached to it. You need to move away from a mindset that starts to build in the design process with the question of how do I teach this to how do I create an opportunity for people to practice this. That's
mm.
a major mindset shift as you start thinking about simulations, because that shift alone reframes the entire design conversation from one that focuses on content to one that focuses on decisions.
Mm. Yeah, that's so true. We saw over the last year, anyone who applies kind of old Addy-like
Hmm.
processes, mindsets to these new AI-enabled types of tools are not getting the value from the AI. And so they're saying it's a failure of the AI. Well, it's actually the failure of the processes and kind of the old mindsets. And so that all needs to change together. So absolutely agree with that. I'd like to maybe dive into a little detail on answering that question a little more tightly here. I'm going to share a screen here. Okay. And a lot of times when we're talking about simulations, and they usually have two major questions that are top of mind. I've been building simulations for over 20 years, and it always comes down to when you're hearing all of this and you're seeing all this data is, well, one is how do you create these simulations? Is it easy or is it still really, really expensive? And so that's usually the first question. And then when they get that answered, then they're like, what's the experience? Why is this different? Now, we don't have time today to address both questions, so we're only going to tackle this first question on how are they created, because usually if you get that answered, then the second part's easier and that's fun, and you can jump in and experience it yourself. But to give you a quick idea of how easy it is now to create simulations, I wanted to actually show you a little bit of how easy that is nowadays. So this is an entirely new authoring capability. This particular tool is called SimGate. This is what Regis creates. And what we've tried to do with this is completely re-envision the instructional design methodology and processes. It's called fluid design. And you have these design spaces. You have a collaboration space, you have a generative space, and you have a fusion space. And the fusion space is where you can upload PDF documents and bring in spreadsheets. You can bring in PowerPoint stuff. And in this particular instance, we're building a simulation on leading with empathy. Once you've loaded all this information through conversation, you can instruct the AI and your copilot to create like a learning brief. And so in this brief, it basically gets agreements with you of, is this the learner? Is this the population? Is this the learning objectives? Is this the business objectives? And then it takes all of that information and uses that to actually start to build an interview survey for subject matter experts. But what's really cool about this is if you don't have time or you have 100 different subject matter experts you need to collect from, you can send out an agent to go and conduct the interview for you, who will then do the interview, bring that information back, and then summarize that information for you, and then all automatically build you a knowledge map, a skill map, all dynamically on the fly, so you can kind of confirm how did the interviews, all the documents and everything I uploaded, how did it recommend building out that course? And then traceability, meaning where did this content come from? You need to have trust that did it pull from the exact right document? Well, it can actually highlight and show you kind of where all that information is. And then ultimately, once it has all this, and this is the best thing about fluid design, is that it will actually create a prototype anytime you want one. So if you want to go back and upload a more source or change the learning objective, no problem. Change it anytime and just have it republish a new simulation. And then when you meet with stakeholders, get that feedback and have them experience it and so on. So why are we showing this is mainly because in order to capture behavioral telemetry, you need simulations. In order to feel confident that simulations are ready, you need a tool to build them. And so giving you a little bit of perspective on that. Um, any quick reactions to that, guys, before I jump in and ask you a few more questions here?
I loved it. I don't think we should hang about though. I think we've got plenty of questions coming through as far as I can see.
All
Hannah's been
right.
rounding them up. Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, we are definitely kind of getting to that Q&A spot.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
got a concise list of questions that I've been keeping up with. So
Oh,
are we on to Q&A yet?
not
I
yet.
think we are there. So why don't we do that, Lance?
All right. Let me see. I've been grabbing and putting them into a Word document. Let's go ahead and get through these. First one, how is behavioral telemetry different than competency assessments?
Um,
Then,
I'll jump
oh,
in on that with
yeah.
a metaphor. For me, think of it as like a pilot being trained. For me, competency data is when a pilot being trained is sitting with a more experienced pilot who's able to observe what they're doing and seeing are they able to do everything that's required as a pilot of this plane. And do they have the competency necessary to execute the task of a pilot? And there's an observational piece element to it. But the behavioral telemetry data is the flight recorder that's in the plane that is recording every single thing technically that the person is doing while they're executing the task of it. So it's not observational. It is digitally capturing every single thing that someone is doing as part of the task and then using that data to really understand exactly what's happening. And so think of it as the difference in being observed by someone who's an expert as compared to a flight recorder that's capturing every single action that someone takes at a behavioral level.
That's beautiful. That's only a wise old guy could come up with something that quickly on your feet. That was a beautiful metaphor. I have nothing to add. That was perfect.
All right, next one. At what point does increasing levels of worker performance measurement infringe on our workers' personal space or become Big Brother-like in the omnipresence of performance observation?
Wow. Either of you
Jump
want
It's
to
a
weigh
great
in?
question. And I think, particularly in the European context, it makes a lot of sense to ask the question because there will be pushback against anything that's observing individual behavior by individuals, by unions, and also, of course, in places like Germany and Netherlands, by workers' councils. And we have to take these questions seriously. I think there's no single right or wrong answer about this, but the way to approach it is through having dialogue. If you have a dialogue and you have representation, you can work out what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Of course, the business has to push for trying to help people improve their skills. But it's reasonable for people to push back and say, yeah, that's fine, but I don't need my bathroom breaks to be measured, for example, which, of course, in some organizations is a fact of life. So I just think, and I hate to say it's because it sounds like a trite answer, it's a matter of working out in each case what's acceptable at both sides rather than trying to impose some sort of all-purpose rule on the general issue.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add, which is just echoing a little bit of what you said, that I think I've seen a lot of organizations that explore this question through the lens of technology, and I don't think that that's the lens to look. That's a cultural question. Every technology can be used in a positive light or a negative light. That's a choice, and that's a cultural choice, not a technology choice.
100%.
Okay, next one. What tools are you using to go through all the various data points?
To analyze all the data points, I'm guessing. So,
Uh, Probably.
okay, if
Yes.
I don't get this right, ask the question again, please. So essentially how this works is you have the simulation, and let's make it really kind of crystal clear. Imagine you want to understand if I'm ready to be a project manager of a certain size project. And so what you do is you put me into a simulation and I would be running that project and in the simulation and I would be making decisions about the scope, the budget and so forth. And then I'd be addressing client issues, maybe last minute change orders. And then I would be taking care of my team who is already overworked and the morale is down and the client's asking for that last minute change request. So I'd be addressing, my boss and who needs me to move things faster and, with less resources, and so I'd be making all those decisions, and that's the behavioral telemetry. And then as I'm going through that, I'm clicking on different perspectives. I'm typing in my rationale. I'm having conversations with AI characters. And all of those are data points that then go into the database. And then a combination of leveraging AI with some other kind of heuristics, if you will, is what is used to create those readiness reports. Or take that data and export it and put it into a skills intelligence type of platform and then enrich that other data set. So that's usually kind of the process. So it's a combination of architecture, agentic architecture, along with simulations that allow us to capture and analyze that data.
Okay, next one. What tool was the leadership dashboard shown? It was on one of the slides.
Yeah, so that all of that is called a product called SimGate, and that's what Regis builds. And so we've been thinking a lot about where's the future of learning going, and we really are we believe it's all around that talent readiness. How do you capture data that would help an L&D professional be able to demonstrate not only are they helping people learn new skills faster, so skill development, but that they can also provide the data that really informs someone's readiness. And so SimGate is a talent readiness platform that does both skill development and skill validation.
Perfect. There's been a number of requests for the AI and L&D report, so I'm sure we'll be
Awesome.
sending that out. What tools or tech are available out there to measure behavioral telemetry? Any orgs currently using it?
I don't, well, I don't know if Donald or David, if you know of any, I'm not, I think I think there's a lot of kind of traditional ways of approaching analytics and data. Um, that quite frankly is still prone to being slow and difficult.
Mhm.
And then there's kind of newer tools that are certainly leveraging AI to help make sense of the data. Now, the real art is, as we all know, you can't trust the AI. There's on average, it's going to have 20%, 30% error that you got to count on. So you need to be able to figure out how do you build checkpoints and architecture into that reduces those errors. And so that's the real art. And I'm not sure of a lot of tools that are really on behavioral telemetry yet. I think it's a rather new field. And certainly that's, we're trying to pioneer that.
Yeah, I would add without, I'll answer the question in a different way. Rather than talking to a specific tool, I'll talk about the shifts that I kind of see going on within tools. When you talk about simulations like SimGate, where are we getting closer to those soft skills? We're getting closer, like the systems can now recognize if you, let's say you're going through a simulation of dealing with a struggling team member or something like that. The systems can now recognize how you're responding, how quickly you're escalating it, how many times you're asking questions as compared to speaking to somebody. It can give you feedback on what you're doing and how you're applying soft skills in ways that weren't necessarily there before. Now, to your point, Mike, and I think that's a critical point, is a lot of the AI stuff that's out there, there's errors on that, and especially things like the more broad use, the question around like Copilot.
Mhm.
Copilot is not a learning tool; it's an AI tool. It's not a learning tool. So when you have opportunities to use tools like SimGate that are leveraging AI but are built by people who understand how learning works. You've got that balance.
Mhm.
You've got the learning component of there that is intentional and it helps bring in the stuff that's critical around why you're using the AI in a simulation context to build someone's practice. It's an
Mm.
important factor that I think we should always be looking at.
And David, I'd be just curious that you kind of just triggered a thought there. If you were advising a CLO or learning leaders today, where would you start experimenting, without risking your own personal credibility? Any advice for people on that?
In terms of experimenting to start learning what's going on in this
Yeah,
space.
learning about behavioral telemetry, data,
Mhm.
simulations, how to get started in this, or experimenting in general. Yeah.
So, first thing I would say is for anyone who's here live or watching the recording, you've taken a great first step. I mean, exploring curiosity, finding out what's available, and if there's a webinar where they're going to talk about it, go in, start developing some competency and some knowledge around that. If there's a tool that's out there that's playing in this space that's got a free trial, carve out a day, get the free trial, and play. I mean, we learn so much from playing and exploring these tools that are in there. Find people who are using it and find out what problems are being solved by that. Um, the biggest challenge in all of that, in my mind, is just carving out space for it, carving out the
Mhm.
space to be intentional about indulging your curiosities and being very intentional about what you want to learn about so that you can put it into the context of the work that you do.
That makes
I can
sense.
add a couple of things in there. I think
Please.
also, David, we can learn a lot when we're working with other people and doing that experimenting, but reflecting on it with others. And I do think we shouldn't underestimate the network effect of people sharing their thoughts and how that accelerates everybody's learning. I'd also ask a question, and I asked it to the group earlier. How on earth do you make the time? Everyone's maxed out. Everyone's got too much on their plate. And now we're saying, that's okay. Just take a bit of time to experiment. We're not saying it tritely. We're not saying it glibly. We know it's difficult, but I'd invite you to think about your future in 2 years' time and say, well, how much do I need to be changing the way I work in order to make sure that I'm developing myself as I need to? And with that focus, what do I need to stop doing now in order to make the time? It's a simple question, very often difficult to answer. We had a chat about it earlier in the chat. So I'd say work with others as well and dedicate time to doing this by stopping doing something else, whatever that might be. Mike.
And Donald, you kind of reminded me, I think if I remember the stat in your report, about 54%, I think, of people are now moving from experimenting to doing,
Yeah,
if I'm
yeah,
articulating that correctly. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
can you
We've
elaborate
been
on
through
that?
this inflection point where now in the most recent survey, the report I showed earlier, over half the people have moved from experimenting or trying to using AI or using AI intensively. So
Hmm.
two very, very straightforward categories, not piloting, using it or using it intensively. It's the majority of people we're surveying now. So it's there. The future has arrived and we can't ignore it. We have to know
Yeah,
what we can do.
makes sense. And David, you and I were talking about this before. The people are experimenting with AI tools, but unless they change their mindsets and their processes, they're not necessarily getting the real value out of it. They might, do a little with ChatGPT and get some content and cut and paste it and maybe go to create an avatar somewhere and maybe a voice somewhere, but they're jumping around in all these different tools, so they're not really getting the real value from it. Any recommendations on that? Because as we're trying to create these better experiences to capture this data, that's got to go smoothly. Any coaching on that?
Yeah, well, it comes back to the mindset that you mentioned for me. I mean, having been in this field for a while, I see repetition of patterns. And one of the patterns that I've seen, whether it be the emergence of, and I'll carbon date myself a lot here, whether it be the emergence of the personal computer, the emergence of the internet, the emergence of the smartphone, we've made in many ways the same mistake as a field with all of those technologies in the sense of we approach it with the wrong question in mind and the wrong mindset. We approach
Yeah.
a new technology and we say, how do I do what I do with this new technology? And that results in a just a transfer. I mean, it's why the first e-learning that came out looked like the PowerPoint slides we used in a classroom. It's why the first mobile learning devices didn't leverage all of the stuff that's out there. It just took the screen and shrunk it, because we do what we know. And
Yeah.
and that's not a lens of opportunity. That's not a mindset of opportunity. If you want to really get the opportunity that comes with simulations and practice and the skills-based economy we're coming into, you have to stop looking at these technologies and say, how do I do what I do? You have to look at the new technology and say, how does this technology change what I do? What does it enable me to do that I've never been able to do before? What problem could I solve that I've always struggled with? Those are questions that bring up opportunity and innovation and new value that we can add. And that's going to be critical in the period we're entering, in my opinion.
So hard. Yeah, very much agree. I know we're really at time here, and as Lance indicated, we're going to capture all the questions we didn't get answered, and we will certainly get those answered and out to all of you. One of the things we just wanted to offer up, because it is our full intention to really add value back to the community, is we wanted to say, if you're interested in skill validation, you're interested in learning more about behavioral telemetry and simulations, we're offering for the first 10, to hit this QR, register. We will convert, whether it's a SCORM package, an e-learning course, or a classroom course that you have materials or something else, build a sim, help you capture that data and start to learn about behavioral telemetry. And we can only offer it to 10 because usually we get so many requests we can't manage it all. So hit that. Also, we did see that a lot of people are interested in the reports. So we'll also be sure to get that out to everyone as well. So I just want to sign off on behalf of Donald and David and myself, Mike Vaughan. We're just so deeply grateful for all of your time today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
So much, Mike, Donald, David. That was a really
Thanks, everyone.
great session. Lots of questions, lots of chatter. So all great things. I am going to steal the screen at this point. Everybody, I hope you will stick around with us for our next session that starts in about 15 minutes. We have Doug Stephen, who's with CGS, and he'll be presenting his session on your L&D metrics are outdated by design. So fix the strategy error before you fix the dashboard. Like I said, that'll get started in just under 15 minutes. So I hope to see you there.